You are listening to episode 57 of The Secular Buddhist. Welcome to The Secular Buddhist. I'm Ted Meissner. The Secular Buddhist is the podcast and website for modern, secular application of early Buddhist thought. The podcast has interviews and roundtable discussions pertaining to engaged Buddhist training and practice, and the companion website has show notes for each episode, along with resource materials on Buddhism, critical thinking, science, secularism, and skeptical thought. Though the podcast focuses on core practice from a secular viewpoint, more traditional teachings are welcome and openly discussed. Bernie Glassman speaks with us about socially engaged Buddhism and the organization Zen Peacemakers. There are many different ways in which our practice can show itself. We can sit with a group at a local center, go on retreats, reach deep states of mental calm and meditation, none of which is a bad thing. The question is, beyond feeling better yourself, what good are we doing? The founder of Zen Peacemakers, Zen Master Bernie Glassman, evolved from a traditional Zen Buddhist monastery model practice to become a leading proponent of social engagement as a spiritual practice. He is internationally recognized as a pioneer of Buddhism in the West and as a founder of socially engaged Buddhism. He has proven to be one of the most creative forces in Western Buddhism, creating new paths, practices, liturgy, and organizations to serve the people who fall between the cracks of society. So, sit back, relax, and have a nice silver peony white tea. My guest today is Bernie Glassman. Bernie, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate being able to speak with you today.
My pleasure.
So what I wanted to do is chat with you about how many of the people who are listening to the podcast are Westerners, and they come to have a Buddhist practice. Tell us your story. How did you first encounter Buddhism, and what was your background before that?
I'm Jewish, and I grew up in a not a religious Jewish scene, but more a socialist Jewish scene in Brooklyn, New York. And during college, so I'm still young, but I'm 72. So college is where I first read about Zen, and that was 1958. So it's over 50 years ago. And I had been searching in spiritual traditions, and particularly drawn to mystical spiritual traditions. And I ran into Zen, so I was close to 20 years old, through reading in a book that had just been published by Houston Smith on the religions of the world. And it's had different titles through the era. And there was a page on Zen, and it really spoke to me, to where I was. And so after that, I started to read everything there was in English about Zen. At that time, there wasn't a lot, so it was easy to read everything. And I didn't really find out about meditation practice until a few years later. And I started to meditate on my own, probably about around 1960. And I got very involved in meditation. And in 63, I actually ran into the person that was going to become my Zen teacher, Izumi Roshi. At that point, he was a young monk working in a Japanese temple downtown Los Angeles. By 1966, I was very heavily involved in practicing with him. Actually, my family, I had a wife and children, and we moved closer to the Zen Center, and I became like his right-hand person, and ordained with him in 1970. And my plan was to remain a Zen priest working in a Zen center, helping people to learn Zen practice and realize the people call it the enlightenment experience. I like to talk about it as to realize the oneness of life, or the interdependence of life. And then in 76, I had an experience in which I felt the sufferings of all the hungry spirits of the universe and realized that they were aspects of myself, and immediately came up about to try to feed, to try to satisfy those hungers. And those hungers were hungers for power, for sex, for money, for enlightenment, all kinds of quests that people had that made them feel unsatisfied. And that experience, immediate with the experience, was this vow to serve, to try to feed all those hungry spirits, realizing this is all one aspect of myself, since we're all interconnected. And that led me to change the venue of where I was going to work, and not just be in a meditation hall, but in all aspects of society, and led me on a path of trying to figure out what are the different upayas or expedient means that would help people realize the interconnectedness of life, coming from all walks of life, not just different religions, but different, the business world, the social action world, different worlds. Because if we're all interconnected, it didn't particularly matter to me, what religion or what your vocation was. We all have that same need to I think, to realize this interconnectedness. And so that's sort of the beginnings of a new path for me, which has taken me to work in the world of business and in the world of social action, and remained a Zen teacher all these years. So I now have many Dharma successors. So I don't run a Dharma center myself anymore. I have about 28 Dharma successors, I think, and they all have different centers, and I support them in what they're doing. And they have Dharma successors. So the Zen Peacemakers has affiliates of about 80 different groups around the world. And some of them are doing social action work, some of them are doing interfaith work, some of them are strictly doing meditation work. They're all different. I don't ask any of my successors to copy me in any ways. They are all doing their own things, but there are many groups within our umbrella that are involved in social action, and many involved in interfaith, because by nature, since I was working in those worlds, I attracted people in those with those interests. Recently, for the last number of years, I've been looking at ways to sort of semi-retire. And actually, maybe 10 years ago, I had decided I didn't want to be in charge of any kind of assets. So I had been in charge of various Dharma centers and places, and I replaced myself in all of those. They're all doing well. And but then we had a mother house here in Western Massachusetts, and for the last number of years I've been trying to move out of being in charge of that, which I now have done. So I'm still sort of a spiritual figurehead for the Zen Peacemakers, but I'm not in charge of any organization or corporation. I do have a corporation which is called the Founders House, which I raise money so that I can do things that appeal to me. I like working in refugee camps. I like working in the streets. I like, there's many things I do. And I'm somewhat of an ambassador for the Zen peacemakers. I can speak. I do workshops talking about what is going on in the various centers and the kinds of work. I started an annual retreat at Auschwitz about 17 years ago, and I'm still doing that. I took a hiatus from it for a few years, but I'm back doing that. And I have a new thing that I'm trying to promote, which is a new form of soup kitchen. I decided, I did a lot of work with homeless and very poor folk in Yonkers, New York. That project started, I don't know, maybe 1987. But around that time, actually 20 years ago, so that would be 91, I decided I should live in the streets for a while to get some kind of gestalt of what it's like to live in the streets. We have 3 tenets in the Zen Peacemakers. The first, not knowing, that is, not approaching a situation with fixed ideas of how to do things, but to be open to deeply listen to what's going on. And so that first tenet is deep listening and not being fixed to given ideas. Gather as many ideas as you can, but not be attached to one or another and bring it a priori to a situation. And then the second tenet, to bear witness, is be in that situation for a while until things come up which you think are the appropriate things to do, and that is our third tenet, loving actions. That is to do something, not just to sit with it or meditate on it, but to start doing things. So since I was going to be working with homeless and very poor people, I decided I should live in the streets for a while, and I started to do that. Like I say, in 91. And after my first street retreat, what struck me was that there were no Buddhist groups helping us in the streets. And I sort of made a vow that someday I would enter that world. And my work in Yonkers was a lot of that. It's still going on. It's wound up to be very successful, hiring people, training people, hiring them, doing many things. Working with, homeless, drug people, people with AIDS. But I also have had the idea since that first street retreat that someday I would like to do a different type of soup kitchen. Because when I went to living on the streets, and I've continued to do street retreats ever since, and there are some students of mine that have made that their major kind of practice. But so I've been in many soup kitchens, and I've always felt that there was somewhat of a lack of dignity going on, and it was not a safe place for families and for kids. So we have, this last year, we've actually started a model for creating what I call cafes. Let All Eat Cafes is the umbrella, and we have one here as our in Western Mass. That's our prototype, and next year I'll hope to help other people open up such things. And if you come to our cafes, the food is free, but you can't tell who's homeless, who's poor, who's rich. There's no distinctions made, and they're somewhat wellness centers. We have games for kids, and we have medical doctor and acupuncture and nutritionists and AA meetings. So it's a full wellness center around. So it's a new model of soup kitchen. That's one of the major things that I'm sort of encouraging. And I'm looking, as we get our prototype functioning well, then we'll be looking for somebody to help, to hire somebody to help open these across the country.
Yeah, it seems that you're taking an approach here as the icon really for engaged Buddhism. Many of the listeners are already very familiar with your work and you, that I imagine you see that this active engagement with the social sphere is very supportive of social change, and the practice you're bringing to that, you're seeing these changes take place. What are some of the wins that you've seen over the years of having engaged Buddhism foster social change?
Okay, yeah. Let me just put on record that I'm not particularly happy with the word engaged Buddhism per se, because I think all forms of Buddhism are engaged Buddhism. If you're sitting in a cave somewhere, that's one form of engaged Buddhism. But you also said, so I use the term socially engaged Buddhism for the work I'm doing. But my deeper sense is that what I would call the goal, theoretically we don't have goals within Buddhism, but we do talk about awakenings. I mean, that's what Buddha was, the awakened person. So the awakening to what? And to me, it's an awakening to the interconnectedness of life, the oneness of life. Now, if you have that, and there was a very famous Buddhist teacher in Japan in the 700s, the founder of the Tantric Buddhist school in Japan, the Shingon sect. His name was Kobadaishi, and many Japanese considered him the leading religious thinker of all Japanese time. And he had, there was something he said which I copy all the time. He says the way you can tell the depth of a person's enlightenment is by how they serve others. So this relates to this notion of awakening to the interconnectedness of life. If the depth of my enlightenment experience, if the depth of my experience of the oneness of life is this, the skin and bones that I call burning, then my focus is going to be on burning. I'm going to want to have deeper enlightenment. I want to have a better life. I want to be centered. It's all about how I can improve myself. If the depth of your experience of the oneness is your family, you're going to be doing things for your family. It's just natural. That's the way it's going to work. If the depth of your experience is your society, you're going to be doing works for your society. Now, other people may say, oh, he's a social activist. He's doing things for the society. From my standpoint, I'm still doing things for myself. It's just that myself is the society. So if my hand starts to bleed, I naturally take care of it. If I see a person laying in the street, that's me, so I naturally will take care of it. If I'm not taking care of that, then that would say that my depth of experience of oneness does not include those people are outside of me. So it might come, if there's so much outside of me that I might walk to the other side of the street to not encounter them. Or certainly I wouldn't say hello to them. But so for me, the deeper or the wider our experience of oneness of life happens, the more we will be doing things in many spheres which people will label as political activism, social activism, all kinds of stuff. And for me, it's simple Buddhism. I'm befriending the self, and all that's changed is the notion of self.
So, Bernie, what do you see as some of the challenges we face in socially engaging with Buddhist practice?
The biggest one, I wrote a book called Instructions to the Cook. I wrote it together with a close friend, Rick Fields, who's passed away. And when I wrote that book, or before I wrote that book, I was still of the opinion that one did Buddhist practice so that you could then do social engagement from a better perspective, that you'd be more prepared or more enlightened, or you'd have more abilities to do those things. In that book, I talk about looking at the ingredients that you have, not the ingredients you don't have. So not to linger on not having enough money, not having enough wisdom, not having enough enlightenment, not having enough time. I say forget about all the things you don't have. Focus on what you do have, and then do something. So that, I think, was a little radical in the world of Buddhism, because I would keep hearing over and over, well, there's the inner self and the outer self, and you gotta really, your Buddhist practice is all about the inner self, and you gotta get to the place where you're not screwing up by doing things in the outer world. And I said there's no difference between inner and outer. And from where you are, look at what you have and do something. Make your offering. So if you're hungry and you walk to the refrigerator and you only see bread and some cheese, don't say, well, I don't like bread, I don't like cheese, I need more ingredients, and so therefore I won't eat. I say make what you can and then offer it, not just to yourself, but to offer it to everyone. And then get more ingredients, and they will come along if you make offerings. So that was the biggest handicap that I saw for many, many years. And people, that handicap would express itself by people saying to me, you're stepping out of the Buddhist world by doing social action. And I would say, no. If my understanding is that this is all interconnected, and whatever we're doing, that is a form of our practice, and it will be continually changing due to our experiences of the oneness of life, and that you could develop techniques coming from I'm going to now just put in some terminology. There's as Buddhists, two terms that come up a lot are prajna and karuna, or wisdom and compassion. And so many people would say you have to develop the prajna, the wisdom, and then when you have that, then you can do compassionate work. I'm saying that you could also realize the oneness of life by doing compassionate work. And it's in how do you do that? So that, sometimes I think that if Buddhism had been developed by women, there might have been a lot more compassionate practices around. And, but anyway, my focus is on how to create, how to bring into the world of compassion ways of doing things so that it will, develop your inner self, or when I'm calling inner self now is the realization of the oneness of life. So it was adding new upayas to the list of ones that are there. So in Japanese then a lot of upayas came about by sort of samurai type people, and in other places they came about from different kinds of cultures. And my focus nowadays has been, how do we help people realize the oneness of life through acts of compassion and social action.
So how can people get involved with Zen peacemakers?
There's certainly many ways. For example, we do have a website, pretty big website, and one of the pages on the website lists all of our affiliates, and they're all around the world. And we also list our affiliates that are involved in interfaith work, and our affiliates that are involved in social action work, and then other affiliates. So if you say to get involved in Zen peacemakers, I have a feeling you mean those that want to get involved in social action type work. You can check out which centers, which places are in your neighborhood or, close to you, and get involved with them. That's one way. And then many people have been tremendously transformed by coming with me to Auschwitz, the Auschwitz retreat. It's extremely transformative, those are probably the most direct. You can't call me and say you'd like to work with me. I'm not doing that anymore. But I do go to Auschwitz, and you could join me there. Then I say that has changed so many people. And then they need to find places near them where they can do things. And it doesn't have to be with a Zen Peacemaker affiliate. There are places. I mean, it's as simple as you walk in the street and you see somebody fall, walk over and help pick them up. I mean, that's the way of getting involved with Zen Peacemakers.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Auschwitz retreat? Because I know you have been doing that for many years, and I always see information about it in a Tricycle and some of the other magazines. But I'd like you to tell us a little bit about it and what kinds of experiences that you've had there.
Yeah. It has definitely changed my life a lot over the years, and that's why I keep going back. The first time I went, it's because I happened to be visiting Auschwitz. I was invited to an interfaith conference that was being held there. But more than that, one of my students was going to walk with a bunch of Buddhist monks from Auschwitz to Hiroshima through war-torn countries. And he wanted me to ordain him, and I did a lay ordination at Auschwitz. So I went there specifically to do that, and I joined this interfaith conference that was sort of the beginning of this walk. And when I walked into Auschwitz was 3 camps. The second camp is called Birkenau. That's what most people, when they see pictures, it's mostly of Birkenau. It's long. It's a huge facility. And when I walked there, I just felt the crying of hungry spirits. It was it was just pulling me. And I knew I had to go back. And I felt I had to go back and sit there. And the more I thought about it, it struck me that this was a place where one answer for diversity existed, and that was to kill everybody that wasn't like you. That was a place where the gays were killed, where the gypsies were killed, where the Jews were killed, where the deformed were killed. And my feeling in life is that we all tend to stay within some club that we've defined. That is, there are certain people we'll invite and others we won't invite. And certain people we see and then we'll walk to the other side of the street. That is, there's the others and there's us. And so I decided that for me, Auschwitz is and we have different things that we do with people that don't fit our club. So some people we put in prison. Some people we just ignore. That's the most common thing. The blacks, we lynched them. Gays, we beat them up. I mean, we have all kinds of methods of dealing with those that don't fit our club. And so I organized the first retreat. It took me a year and a half. And the organization was to invite as many differences as I could. Children of Holocaust survivors, children of SS officers, people around the camps, the gypsies, the gay, as much diversity as I could. So the first retreat we had about 150 people, maybe 8 different religions, 20 different countries, so many cultures. And at first we were at odds with each other because that's what happens when you bring people from other segments of life into your life. There's a lot of stuff that bugs you about them. And I also organized the retreat so that the first day it was quite overwhelming, that any ideas you had about Auschwitz or about diversity or oneness, they sort of disappeared just due to the overload of what was going on there. And then we did, every day we did counsel, we did meditation, we chanted names of people who died there, we met in the barracks and evenings, met at different venues. And by the 3rd, 4th day, we were a family of diversity, and a lot of healing went on. Now, when I did that first retreat, I had no intention of continuing it, but it was so powerful and so transformative that decided to keep it going. And through the years, it's opened me to so many different. I found love there. I was brought up sort of macho, and I didn't do much grieving as a youngster. In my initial years in Zen, I was very tough, and it took a while before I learned to be soft and to be loving. And that's a big practice for me. And Auschwitz has been one of the biggest teachers. So I always say to the people who comment and when I write about it, that the teacher at Auschwitz is Auschwitz. It's the place, and it will transform you. What we do is organize it to help in that transformation.
For people who are interested in some of the things that Bernie's been discussing, please do go to the website, and that address is www.zenpeacemakers.org. I see that the Bearing Witness retreat at Auschwitz-Birkenau is scheduled for October 31st through November 4th, 2011. There is a link to that under international activities, so you will see it there when you go to the website. Bernie, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate what you've been doing for many years in helping those of us who may have been approaching our practice as a very personal, introspective kind of thing, and moving it towards social engagement and change. Thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the companion website at www.thesecularbuddhist.com, and you'll find an entire web page devoted to this and every episode. There are also links to discussions about today's topic on the Secular Buddhist Facebook fan page. The music for the Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizan Neptune's CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Monty Levinson of Taihei Shakuhachi and Rodrigo Rodriguez. Their websites are linked on the Secular Buddhist on the About Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on The Secular Buddhist.